Hello, my name's Patrick. I'm a technical writer. I've been one since 2010 and I've been working with MadCap Flare since 2011. Um, when I first started using Flare, they used the CSS that came from RoboHelp, and everything was a paragraph tag, and it used to drive me crazy. So I took some classes from lynda.com, CSS for developers and HTML essentials, and kind of dove in head first to see what it was all about and to see if I could improve that experience for myself and the team uh, to something easier to use. Um, Flare has made many improvements over the years. When I first started using Flare, the style sheet editor, the GUI one, didn't really have too many options. There wasn't a whole lot you could do. The advanced had more than the simple view, but you still had a lot of things in there that you couldn't do that you could apply through the text version, opening up the CSS in Notepad++ or Notepad. That probably should have been there, but they've been adding them over the years. I'm pretty happy with it now, but I've been using the text side for so long, I still go into the text. For reference, I use the w3schools.com. A lot of these functions, these selectors will work in MadCap Flare. For example, I have CSS before right now, and there's also a P after that you can select. These are really handy if you, let's say you have a figure caption that you want to stick to images with avoid page breaks, or if the image has uh, a a paragraph figure caption or a caption after it, you could force those elements to stick to each other. You can also make images, which is why we're here today, dynamically adjust and resize based on the viewport for your online help systems. That will look perfectly normal in your PDF outputs. We use two outputs, PDF and HTML5. We originally used the tri-pane. That was the most popular. I kind of moved on to side nav. So the first I would like to talk about is the presentation and the audience. Since I made the template for our company and the CSS for MadCap Flare, I wanted to make it as simple as possible for the other writing teams. A lot of people came from Word, some people came from FrameMaker. The biggest thing was I didn't want to burden people with too many formatting options. So I automate a lot of these CSS styles, so they automatically changed based on the position of where they're at. Like this note, if I refresh the editor, you can see it's the same style. It appears different inside of the table than the out. I use the complex selector for this, and this reduces the amount of styles that you have listed. Some technical writers may want to have a lot of control. We had a group that splintered off and made a style sheet with 60 styles because the developers wanted to control every aspect of the project. And that's okay, but I always like to consider the audience when I create either a template or a document to make it simple for them, because that's our job, is to take something complicated and communicate that in the easiest way possible for the widest audience. So today I want to go over the image types that I like to use and how I use those, how I adjust those images in the CSS for presentation. The first is JPEGs. JPEGs are great for photographs. The second you want to layer text in there to, like I have an arrow and text, call something out, you probably want to migrate to PNG format, because the way JPEGs compress the images, they kind of blurs the colors close to each other, so you'll see some pixelation around the font for those callouts. PNGs, you don't get that, but the sizes of the images can be a little bigger, so always keep in mind it's a balancing game. I do a lot of parts manuals, and I don't like to use raster images, the pixel-based art for that. For those, I prefer to use PDFs I use CAD software. I've used ISO Draw or SolidWorks Composer, and I'll output it to a SVG, and then I'll open it up in Adobe Illustrator. I'll make some modifications, and I'll save it as a PDF. And then I drop that PDF inside of my topic, and there we go. We have the image. And you'll see why when you apply vector images, it's always super sharp for your PDF outputs. And then you can tell Flare to convert it to a PNG for an online help system if it's not compatible. You could always use SVGs too, but sometimes I have issues with the artboards switching around. So let's talk about MadCap Capture here for a second. MadCap Capture is really great. You can do your screenshots. You can plug it right into Flare. The best part about it are the hotspots. You could say have a map of the country and then draw borders around the graphical icons on the image, and then if they click within that border, it will open up a URL or a place in the project that you want it to go. It's totally incredible that they do that. Most of our writing teams still use Snagit. They like Snagit. They take screenshots of software configuration screens for engineers. It's easy, it's quick, and it gets the job done for them. I prefer to use Illustrator and layer images. I can take this image, open it up in Adobe Illustrator. I can modify it. I can change it to what I want it to be, and I can save it right there in the project. There's a caveat though. If you haven't saved your changes, you want to save those changes before you modify an image in MadCap Flare. So let's say I wanted to change these callouts, right? I could change this to fan, and we're done. I save this image. It preserves the layers. I can do all sorts of things. I can move things around. So you can zoom in, zoom out. It's always going to be super sharp. Great image. Now we're fine. And you'll see that it changed. Now it says fan. So let's set this to the center. And let's make it about, I don't know, 5 inches too. I applied this image as well. This is a 2 megabyte image. Remember, it's a balancing game. You don't want to make your project too big and your PDF 50 megabytes, but you want the image to be open and clear enough to where somebody could see it on the screen of a 4K or a 2K or a 1080p screen. So let's look at the CSS for the images. So for my default medium, I have it set to width. Your PDF outputs will recognize width and height. For the online outputs, let's go back here. The writers were used to writing in Word, and they wanted to use inches to gauge how big the image is on the sheet. You can name this whatever you want, but I prefer to use pixels because it's always an absolute. I had problems with M's. If somebody changed their DPI settings, things would be all over the place. So I just set everything to pixels, and everything's always perfect no matter what the DPI settings are on the host machine. For your online outputs, height and width does not apply. So you have to use the max height and width and min height and width. Now if you apply both of those settings, like you'll notice the min is auto, the max is auto, the min width is 43%, the min or the max width is 43%, the min width is 288 pixels. Using these settings, you can make the image dynamically change in your online output to always look a specific way in the viewport. It's always works. Everybody loves it. I also like to use the pop-up. Now there's a little trick with the thumbnail that you can do. You can set both the max height and max width to auto, and the pop-up icon will be the exact same size and resolution as the image size. So when they click on that pop-up, it will fill up to the full viewport of the online help system or whatever browser they're using to look at the content. And it will just be always presentable. And then if the user wants to save that image, they can hold their touch down to come up with the browser's menu to either save the image, or they can open up the image in a new tab for a desktop. So let's save this content. I'm going to show you the PDF output first. And here we go. We have our topic. We have a PDF. You have your image here, and you have your vector image. This is really great for parts manuals, these vector images, because no matter how much I zoom into this, it's always going to be super, super sharp. And it can be as big or as small as you want it to be. So if you have size constraints, you can make smaller images of those vector line drawings, and they render perfectly because it's using a programming language for the presentation. Now let's look at the variable viewport. All right, let's open up the output folder so I can use the okay. So here's the online adjustment system. Now you'll notice the image is set. There's the pop-up. I set the image to be 5 inches. The master page we set to be no more than 1200 pixels. And the reason being is that if you have a 4K monitor, you're going to have all your content flow on the left, and you're going to have writers that like to put the tables in the center instead of the left, or use the default tab. So it kind of knocks off the flow of the content. You'll have all this content here, and then way over here you'll have a table, and then it will go back here again. But using those settings is really great because the smaller your viewport gets. So let's say you're on your tablet, or let's say you're on your phone. The image never goes smaller than what you specifically want. And you can change this per medium too. When it goes to mobile medium, you could say I don't want it any wider than a 3-inch screen, a 3-inch width screen. And you can stretch that out. And then when you click it, the image is always going to show the maximum space in the viewport, or beyond the viewport, your viewable area. And if somebody wants to save it, they can open the image in a new tab. They can save the image. The development groups, everybody loves this stuff. Now, how we got it to work on the master page, I used a div. Maybe I can show the checklist in another video, because I have a dynamic checklist to where you can go through steps and then check boxes, and it saves that state for when you close the browser and reopen up the browser. It doesn't work for every single browser anymore, though. So we have our breadcrumbs and our topic toolbar in a table, and I just curve the ends. And then in here I have a body proxy, and it's all floating inside of a div. And I did set the CSS inside of the master page, and I do allow local style sheets. And then how it works is it's just a 1200px div, and I tell the content to automatically grow and shrink, but never exceed that 1200 px. Where is it in here? Oh, I set it up here as a class, the relative. So that's it. If you want to share, if you want to see making a whole template from scratch, if all the elements, we can talk about other trials and tribulations we've had with MadCap Flare over the years. with people having issues. For example, when you're working in TOCs and you have folders inside of your TOC folders, the notorious dot dot slash that automatically adds, and you have to go into the text to clear it out. And also, don't forget to associate your program files. Let's say I like to use Adobe Illustrator. You have to open up these topics outside of Flare, like your CSS, to be able to see the program that you like to use on the list. I like to use Notepad++. Big proponent of using regular expressions in HTML. It's just so easy. Somebody will come up to you and say, hey, instead of italicizing it, can we make it bold? All I have to do is do a regex script to replace that CSS style, and it will just go through the whole project. I believe there's a developer in Sweden or somewhere in Europe who made an add-on to the MadCap Flare application that will do it too. I believe he has a basic version for free, and you can buy an advanced version for $25. I don't have it on top of my head right now. I'll have to review my notes, but the next video I'll bring it up how to use that. I hope this was informative for you. Help you present better images in MadCap Flare. And I'll see you on the flip side.